that's not it. And then we have, there it is. Okay. Here we are. You can see my surface. You can hear me. We are all set to get going. I'm going to clear my space and leave a little piece of paper over here, and I'm just going to do a little bit of sketching before we actually start talking about our subject today, which is going to be playing with watercolor pigment. And I'm using the word pigment rather than paint because we're going to be talking about just the different qualities of the different pigments. And when I say paint, it just sounds like a broader term. It sounds like, you know, and when we talk about pigment, that means we're going to talk about the different qualities that we're going to find in our paint. So we're going to just start by opening up a tube. And this is Schminke, I'm probably saying it wrong, translucent orange. And most of the time I've got all these palettes here, and you guys can usually see me working with paint directly from the palette, but I also like working with the paint just straight from the tube as well. And you can see I just squeezed it right onto my paper. And that's a bold move that I learned from one of my favorite artists, Jean Haynes. She'll squeeze her paint right on, and sometimes she'll even leave those little chunky blobs right on her paper as she's painting. And I'm going to just give that paint a chance to move on my page. And I should have freshened up my water. I think it was dirtier than I thought, but that's okay. And of course I've got my board tilted so you can see as soon as that paint gets wet, those little, the pigment starts to flow downward. I'm just going to scoop up a bit of that pigment and just move it across the page. And something like this is generally how I start most of my painting sessions. This is nothing you guys haven't seen before if you've been following me for a while. But it's just, lately in my studio, this is almost all I've been doing. I've been getting my paper out, I've been grabbing some pure color, just like I have here, and I've been, oh, that was really splashy. The brush I'm holding right now is actually not my usual Escoda Versatile. It's a Princeton Neptune. It's a number 4 quill brush. So it's got this, I bought it because it has this beautiful wire holder on it that keeps the bristles in place, and it just looks so old-fashioned and artsy that I just had to buy it just for the looks. But I've been enjoying using it lately because it's a big fat brush, and it's got that flick that you can just, you know, sweep it across your page and have kind of a really juicy approach. And isn't that pretty? That's just one color that I just love seeing the way it moves across the page and those little sparkly splashy bits. And it's looking a little bit yellower on my screen than it's actually going down. It's a beautiful pure orange. And then I think I'm going to go bold again with adding another color to this. I'm going to add some ultramarine turquoise. Oh, that's not ultramarine turquoise. Oh, yes, it is. Okay, ultramarine turquoise. That sounds wrong, but that's what I've written on my palette, so I'm going to trust that it is what it says. And you can see as I touch it in, this is a color that wants to swoosh across the page, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes as we talk about some of the properties of our different pigments. And of course, when orange and blue get together, they can start to mix and make a neutral. So we're going to see some different things happen as these colors start to flow together. And oh, that's just so beautifully colorful. It makes me think of an exotic bird or something. And when you start a painting like this or a sketch, it's very open-ended, so you can really start to think about what you might make as you see this painting start to happen on the page. And maybe it's an issue where you want to turn your paper and you start to see something different. Actually, here you almost see an eye here and a giant beak, so it could be that bird we're talking about. Or maybe if we turn it this way, we might see something else. And lately I've been doing that, just starting with this color play and creating actually amazing landscapes by playing with color. And then once I get to this very early stage where something happens that gets me all excited, I'll take that fun little color play and I'll make it into something. And I'm going to show you that right here. We're going to move this aside. This little piece right here has me very excited, and It's just a little 6-inch square of paper, but yesterday working in my studio, I took some of my neutral colors that I don't work with a lot, and I just started sweeping them across the page. I love using this diagonal, and then moving from one color up here and another color down below, and just letting them flow together and play. And I have this feeling like we're on the side of a hill, and it's like late autumn. The grass and the weeds are brown and crunchy. And then when this area was wet here, I dropped on some kind of fuzzy yarn, and that created this beautiful texture that you should be able to see slightly in here. Now this little sketch isn't finished, but as you know, every little brush stroke that I made started contributing to a story in my head, where I'm thinking, I started with just, this is a swash of brown across the page, and then I got to start thinking about, oh, it's starting to look like, this meadow in the autumn. And then as I had an idea of what it was becoming, I could continue enhancing that as I painted, and it was so much fun. And I'm looking forward to adding maybe some negative painting to bring out the texture in this area here, and just to continue to contribute to that feeling that I wanted to express in the browns and neutrals that were happening on my page. So you never know when you're playing with pigment what you might get out of the whole thing. So so now we have two very different paintings here, and as you do this whole color play, like I said, you might start to see something in it, or you might just continue to kind of have fun in an abstract sense. And here's another that has the similar very vivid colors. I think I've showed you this before. And just loving the vibrancy and the way the different pigments work together. And we're going to talk about how they work together as we talk about working with pigments today. And as this painting starts to dry, the paint's going to do different things. As it's very wet, we had a lot of fluidity here. We see the colors flow, and we see things really soft. We don't have a lot of crispness in this area here, just the little white specks where the paper stayed dry as I swept my brush across. And then over here we see an edge, and that edge is created because this orange area was much wetter than the turquoise pigment that I put down over here. So the turquoise and the orange didn't flow together as soft and smoothly in this area because it just wasn't as wet. And so we start to get that edge, or the bloom or cauliflower that you I'm sure have experienced in your paintings. So those different amounts of moisture create different events in your painting. And as the painting starts to dry, you're going to get different effects as well. So I've got a really pointy little brush here. This is a Loose Goose brush from Cheap Joe's Art Supplies, number 1. And I love how it creates, whoops, that's a little too dry. I love how it creates just a very fine line when you're painting. So I can take that Loose Goose brush and start creating maybe some little thready tendrils of color on my page. And I should make sure you guys can see that. It's so easy on a video to just paint right off the page, right out of the video screen. And so I might want to take and fill in this little gap here with some little tiny feathery brush strokes. Oh, too much paint on there, so it's making thick brush strokes. But if I take this brush right here and put it in the area where the color is still damp, you're going to get a different effect, and you can see how it bleeds and flows right into the orange. And yet as the orange starts to dry, you're going to actually see less bleeding. So if I continue to put some of those little hairy brush strokes in here, they're going to stay a little more distinct as the paper dries. So I can do those little lines, and where earlier they might have flowed completely soft like this area here, now they're going to start to remain fairly distinct and keep that crispness. So then we have this interesting balance. And now I think I'm seeing an elephant, and this is his trunk. So you never know what might happen as you're painting. So and then of course we can always introduce other colors, and I'm not feeling another color right now. I'm not thinking of one that I might love adding, unless you maybe stayed within the same color family and maybe added a bit of a yellow to go with that orange. Or let's add actually over here this cobalt turquoise. And once upon a time I did moisten everything before I started, so it should be damp enough so I can pick up some color. Cobalt turquoise is such a good companion for the ultramarine turquoise. And if I just flick with my little loose goose brush, might get some interesting effects. Or maybe I want to go down in this corner. Oh, lost my screen there for a second. And just paint some fine lines over here. And when you're painting those fine lines, you might decide that you don't want them all to be distinct, so then you can go in with a little bit of water and just blur them a little bit together. They don't have to stay nice and crisp. They can be kind of a little bit of back and forth. And I love doing that kind of contrast. And you can take that pure cobalt teal. I think I keep saying cobalt turquoise, but it's cobalt teal, I think. And add a little water there. And so you lighten that color as well. And now it's that moisture that I just added is sweeping down into the color we already placed. So we're going to get that imbalance of moisture, which is then going to give us cauliflowers or blooms. So that's going to give us more texture yet in our image. And over here where I flicked with my brush, that cobalt turquoise kind of faded into the orange and isn't so pretty anymore. Maybe I'd want to just take some pure color and dot it in there and give it a chance to settle in, using those splashes that I placed as my guide as to where to go. And I don't know, I mean, I might be messing it up as I'm trying to talk and paint at the same time. And I find when I'm working intuitively, you have to be very focused on what the painting needs and thinking about, what might look good in different areas of the painting. And thinking here, I think I have that translucent orange in one of my palettes, but I'm not sure where. So I'm going to just squeeze a little bit more onto my paper here, just in the corner. And I'm going to talk about why I don't paint all the time with pigment straight from the tube here in a minute. Trust me, we'll get to that. But maybe I want to just add a little more orange to make my painting just a little bit more about the orange. And I still think I need a little bit more than that. I'm going to put it right on my brush this time, because there's not really a rule about that. Do what you like. Do what feels like it might work better for you. And what if we swept it right over the ultramarine and then swished it right down the page to give us a little more vibrance? What would happen? And this kind of color play, again, it's just that chance to ask yourself, what if, and then give it a try. Because if you don't make room for that in your painting exploration, I think you just don't grow as quickly. You want to be experimental because it's so good for you. So, okay, I'm going to take a break from that, and I'm going to start talking about pigment and why you need different kinds of pigment, what different kinds you should be looking for, and so forth. So I'm just going to take a pause here for a second and switch screens, and then I'll talk a little bit about what's going on in my studio, and then we'll come back and talk about pigment here. Okay, I think I did that right. I'm just going to mute for a second. I'm still fighting a cold. Okay, sorry guys. I'm back here. switch over to my camera. Come on. Why is that not working? Sorry guys, just trying to figure this out. I just lost my camera again. So annoying. Oh, okay. There we go. Okay, we got my camera switched over. Boy, this is, I don't know why it's not working as smoothly as it has in the last several weeks. Hi guys, Angela Fehr again. This time you get to see my face. We're going to talk more about paint in just a second, but I wanted to take a minute because I wanted to let you, give you the chance to look down at the video description. Today I just have 3 links down there, and they're important links because one of them actually can win you free enrollment in one of my online classes. So I wanted to make sure you knew about that. I just launched, today is the big day, I launched a new course today called Creative Watercolor Techniques. And this course is for anybody who wants to use watercolor but doesn't want to be like a traditional watercolorist where you're just painting serious paintings. This is more for someone who is interested in lots of hobbies, you know, calligraphy, art journaling, scrapbooking, really anything beautiful you're doing with your hands, and wants to incorporate watercolor into whatever you're already doing. And so I wanted to design a course for that because I have so many friends who are in that situation where they're hobbyists. They have all these different artistic outlets, and they don't want to just be exclusively limited to watercolor. So I built this course. I had help. I have 2 guest authors who share lessons in the course, and this course has 12 lessons, 4.5 hours of video content sharing different ways to use watercolor, tips from me, professional watercolor artist, about what supplies you should be looking for, what things you can kind of cheap out on and use you know, more hobby type materials, and other areas where you might want to spring for the professional artist supplies, as well as just different ways that you can use watercolor, different mediums you can use it with, and so forth. We even do a painting on a watercolor canvas that we've treated with watercolor ground. So there's lots of content there, and there's a link down below in the description to the course if you're interested in checking it out. Check out the link on my blog because it talks not just more about the course, but it shares a link to a video, another YouTube video that I did today, which is all about painting a floral background that you can use maybe for a card or a project. And then there is, what else? There's a giveaway. That's what you really want to know about, right? The giveaway is I'm giving away enrollment in the course, and that means if you've already bought the course, you don't have to worry because I'll just refund your enrollment if you win. And then I'm also going to send one lucky winner a complete watercolor kit, a palette full of paint, paint from Daniel Smith and Core, my favorite Escoda rigger brush, and a pad of Arches paper. So you want to enter that giveaway. I know you do. So you'll want to check out the link down below in the description for that, as well as checking out the course, because the course is available for half price until November 18th. Okay, so that's my little infomercial part. And so we're not really going to talk about watercolor as a hobby today in this lesson because, like I said, there is already a video for that that I put up on YouTube today, the floral background, which is kind of also a promo for the course. And okay, so then we're going to move back into talking about paint and pigment and some of these wonderful tubes of watercolor paint. There we go. Now you can see it. This is actually my new favorite color, and anytime I buy new paint, there's always a new favorite color that I just fall in love with using. And we're going to just talk about the different ways I use watercolor paint. And I'm not a academic artist. There are artists who have color swatches. They have pigment numbers. Apparently, all of these pigments have fancy numbers. And they should be on the tube of paint. So not seeing it on this one pigment number, but you can usually either find it on your tube or on the website of the manufacturer, the pigment number, which helps you to cross-reference across different brands. This is what I've heard, because it's not my kind of thing. I always look up different. I don't really spend a lot of time looking up different things. I usually buy paints because I like the name and I think they might be pretty. So again, I'm a user. I'm not a student. So I buy stuff and I use it, and I learn by that trial and error that we're talking about. So that's how I choose paint, and I like to try different brands. This one that I was holding up right here is Sennelier, and that's a French artist's watercolor, is what it says on here. So, and they've been around for a long, long time. And so I wanted to try those. They have honey in their binder, apparently, which helps them to keep from getting really dry and crackly in your palette. And I'm liking the colors. They're very beautiful. So, another great brand to try. And I'm going to talk about some of the different brands that I have. And again, it's not going to be an exhaustive, studied academic tutorial that I'm giving you here, but just what I've experienced in using watercolor pigment, and why I choose the colors I choose and how they all work together. So, welcome to everybody who's just tuning in now. We're going to move over back again to my painting board, and I'm going to just kind of show you some different colors, and we'll talk about pigments and how to use them. So yeah, let me just, yeah, and I am going to answer your questions too. I'm going to go through the chat and scroll through towards the end of the lesson so that I can get to your questions as well. So let's just switch over to my work surface again, and if I do this right, hopefully it works more smoothly than it has today, because it's been really kind of a nuisance. There we go. Just switching over. This is the course cover page, or the course image for my new course, and I hope that you will at least check out the description. It is on sale until November 18th. It's $29 US, and that you need to use the code first dibs when you check it out, if it's not showing up as you check when you go through the checkout process. And that first dibs code will work for either the Canadian or the US dollars. Yeah, it just doesn't want us. Okay. There we go. Okay, so we're back here again, looking at my paper with my little color play here, and there's now a big bloom all along here, this kind of crackly edge from adding that second layer of orange. And look how I've got kind of a neutral tone to my orange as it's mingled with the turquoise as it's flowed down the page. And you can really tell at the very bottom where this little puddle of paint has accumulated, it's almost a brown. So those beautiful neutrals make the bright parts, the bright colors, stand out even more. So don't be afraid of letting some of those complementary colors mix, because you get, again, some really beautiful neutrals, quiet spaces in your painting that help the brighter colors stand out. Okay, I want to just talk quickly about some different kinds of paint pigment, and I'm going to move this out of the way and pull up just a scrap of paper. Actually, this is the back side of my floral pattern tutorial, which is my other YouTube video that went live today, so make sure you check that out. We're just going to put a little paint on the back side, doesn't hurt it. So basically, I've listed a few different kinds of watercolor pigment, and we're just going to go through them. First of all, most watercolor paint is considered to be transparent, but transparency is I can't even think of the word. Transparency is relative. Not all colors are as transparent as others. So you might have one color that's very clear and very pure, and that translucent orange actually is a really good example. It's a very clear color, and you can see that because right here where the color is lighter, you can see how much of the white of the paper is showing through in a beautiful rich way. And I just dripped, so I'm going to have another cauliflower adding even more texture, which I don't think is a bad thing on this kind of a painting. So first of all, most watercolor paint is transparent, at least to some degree. The watercolor paint that isn't transparent is called gouache, and that's G-O-U-A-C-H. If you're wondering how that was pronounced, it's gouache, approximately. You can add a more French accent if you want to. But then some watercolor paint is also more opaque. I have over here yellow ochre, which is is a bit of an opaque color, and you can see it's kind of got it just kind of covers a little bit better. And you'll notice the best way to tell if a color has opacity to it, is opaque or not, is just to see how cloudy it looks when you dot it into another wash of color. So let's say I have, let me find a color here I can mix it with. Let's use the ultramarine blue. So I've got some ultramarine blue here. And then if I want to, an ultramarine blue is a nice transparent color. So if I wanted to add the yellow ochre over top of that, I can dot it in. And it actually, if I were to wait for the ultramarine to dry, it actually would cover a bit the ultramarine. And if I add it now to here, you can see how that color gets kind of cloudy in there. And so just like a drop of milk in your drinking glass, if you add water to that, you're going to get a cloudiness. So using a color that's got some opacity to it is going to give you that kind of cloudy effect, and it actually will cover over a more transparent color, even if that color is slightly darker. I don't use a lot of opacity in my paintings. I tend to go towards the transparent colors, because I love the way they layer. When you layer multiple transparent colors over other transparent colors, especially as they've dried and then you add a new layer, you get this beautiful rich depth that just glows. And of course, once you start adding opaque colors, it doesn't glow anymore. It's got a little bit more cloudiness to it. Another property of pigment that I love is sedimentary or granulating colors. And I'm using both the terms kind of interchangeably because most sedimentary colors are also granulating. And by that I mean they have some texture to them. And sedimentary colors tend to have little pigment particles in them. And one great example is the sodalite blue, which is a color I talked about in my painting lesson last week. And the sodalite, you can see it goes down very dark, like Payne's gray. But if you add a little water to it, or if you give it a chance to dry, it starts to separate, and you start to see these beautiful little specks as it dries of different color in there. It's almost got this undertone of blue, and then these little tiny black flecks in it that are just gorgeous. And another color that does a similar thing that's quite beautiful, we're just going to give that time to dry and settle, because then we'll start to see the sediment and the granulation. Another color that does that is cobalt violet. And as much as it might go on smooth, as it starts to dry or as it flows, you start to see little pigment particles accumulate in the hollows of the paper. And we're going to give that a chance to settle again, because it always takes a little bit of time. And I find that colors made by Daniel Smith are often very sedimentary or granulating. And the reason that is, I think, is because they make a lot of colors that are mineral based. So of course, if you have a color that's based in a mineral like sodalite or hematite, you're going to have to grind up that mineral in order to get that color. They have an amethyst, genuine, which is a little bit here. I'll just dot that in. I think that's the amethyst. And again, you're going to see the little bits of texture, and we're seeing it right now, especially in the cobalt violet. I'm going to pull it closer to the camera so you can see it a little bit better. Right in there. Can you see that texture? So as it dries, and with a more heavily textured paper, like my indigo art paper, you're going to see it even more. So it's going to depend on your paper a little bit. And I learned as I was painting, originally when I first started painting, I painted all my skies using cobalt blue. Cobalt blue goes on very smooth. It's not a granulating color. And so you get a beautiful smooth sky. And when I started using ultramarine blue, and you can actually see it in this corner right here with this wash of ultramarine, it granulates just a little bit. You get a little bit of that texture showing up. And so it's beautiful, but you're going to get a different effect, even though they're very similar blues. So I love using the sedimentary and granulating colors because of the texture they create. And yeah, so now we're going to talk for a second about colors with a high dispersion. And I don't usually see this discussed when you're researching color. They don't always tell you whether a color is going to have a lot of flow or not, but it's something that's become important to me. Because when you have a color that you touch to paper and it just goes swish across the page, it's so beautiful and it has so much power in your painting. I'm going to pull over, right over here. You can see this yellow right here is a high dispersing color. It's cadmium yellow from Core. And I had the violets and the pinks down, and this violet is quite a bit darker than yellow. But because the yellow is a high dispersing color, that when it touches that wet wash, it just pushes out, then you get to have this impact of yellow over top of this wet wash of violet. And so you actually can use a lighter value color over a darker value color because it'll actually push that color out of the way, which I think is so awesome. I'm going to show you actually right now. So let's say, let's pick a dark color. Let's pick Windsor Violet. I'm going to put it right here. So we have a nice dark wash of Windsor Violet, and it's filling our page, but it feels a little bit dull and boring. We want something to happen. So let's grab, actually we're going to grab Indian Yellow, this also another high dispersing color, and lots of the color from Core is high dispersing. So let's flick it on there. And right away you can see it just goes whoosh. And I splashed it on instead of just painting it on. You can do either one. So a high dispersing color is a really great way to add kind of this movement into your painting. And it looks really awesome on video as well, as you guys can see. So yeah, that's kind of fun. Now, something I don't talk about very often is light fastness. And every pigment you buy, at least if it's the good quality pigment, is going to have a light fastness rating on it. And watch me pick up, oh, here we go. So here we have light fastness 1. Here's quinacridone magenta. And it should say on here somewhere. Oh, this one doesn't want to. I'm probably not looking, oh, light fastness not available because they're, and that's because the colors made by Core are very new and they use a different formula, and there's some kind of government thing they have to go through in order to get their light fastness rating. So don't be afraid of the Core colors just because they don't have a light fastness rating. Here, the light fastness for this Cinereus blue is 2. And so, and this color here is my Schminky translucent orange. And again, we have to inspect the tube until we find the numbers. Oh, and they have symbols, and so I think I'd have to look up what the symbols mean. And I'm not going to do that right now because that might take a while. So just look for the different light fastness ratings. And the higher the light fastness rating, I better have this right, the better the color is going to last over time in light. I don't pay a lot of attention to light fastness ratings, and this is why. If I paid attention, and if I was really worried, spent a lot of time thinking about it, I wouldn't be able to use this color. Oh, and that mixed with the Indian yellow, so it is even prettier. And that's my opera pink, and I love opera pink, but it doesn't have a great reputation when it comes to light fastness. And I just feel like, for me, I don't want to not be able to enjoy a color because it might look a little duller in 15 years or 20 years or 100 years. With watercolor, we keep them out of direct sunlight. You hang it in a place where you have indirect light, and you frame it under glass. You can frame it under UV protected glass if you want to, museum glass, and so there's different things you can do to preserve it so it lasts longer. But the paintings I've done with the opera pink, I still have beautiful rich color even though it's been 5 years, and I haven't, at this point, they haven't been protected in any way. So, I'm just not going to let a number on a tube keep me from enjoying a color if it's a special color to me. And I look at old photos from when I was a little kid, from the 70s or whatever, and you know what, the colors change in the older photos over the years too, and it kind of just adds to the beauty of the age of that image. And just like the old masters used colors that are nowhere near as bright now as they were back when they painted them, it just is a fact of life and being an artist that not all your colors are going to stay quite as pure. And so let's just enjoy them while we can and not worry too much about the light fastness. And of course, if you have strong opinions about that, feel free to choose other colors that have a higher light fastness rating. Okay, one more element of paint that I want to talk about, aspect, is the staining properties. And certain colors are going to be higher staining than others, which means once you place them on your paper, you're going to be less likely, to see them lift off. So here's my ultramarine turquoise again, and I just put a nice little slash there. Now if I wanted to grab a piece of paper towel here and lift that color, you can see a lot of it is left behind. So it's a ultramarine turquoise, phthalo turquoise. These are high staining colors. That means when you put them on your paper, you better be sure, because they're not going to want to come off very well, and they're going to fight you on lifting off the page. And the main time I don't want to be using a staining color is when I'm painting a sky, because a beautiful sky, often I'll put a swash of blue over my paper, and then I'll want to maybe lift out some clouds with a paper towel or a tissue. But a staining color is not going to let me get those beautiful white clouds back. And it's really pretty to create a soft cloud. Let me find a blue that doesn't stain. To create a beautiful sky. We're making the world's smallest sky right here. And then to take your tissue or your paper towel and just lift out some beautiful cloud shapes. And this is that cinereous blue that I was holding earlier from Schminke. It's that lovely clear sky blue, and it lifts beautifully. So I like using it for skies, whereas I would probably avoid the phthalo turquoise when I'm painting a sky. There are bluer, less green shades of the ultramarine, the turquoises, that would make a beautiful sky. But again, you have to be careful about the staining when you're placing a color that you might want to lift. Okay, so that's a few different elements of pigment that I use, that I enjoy, and that create different beautiful effects. And you can see here, as these start to dry, some of those different qualities I talked about. You can see how this color in this area here does look cloudy. This little gray that's puddled right here is quite murky and cloudy looking. These colors that I mentioned as being sedimentary or granulating have some texture happening. This one especially, but over here in this ultramarine blue as well, and over in the sodalite and the cobalt violet. So, those really stand out as opposed to these smoother colors, the ones that don't granulate. And so we're seeing some different things happening as the paints dry. And that's where as the paint dries, those qualities of the pigment really start to show. And I think we need all the different types of pigment in order to contrast with each other and make our paintings more dynamic. So pulling over again my little autumn grasses sketch that I've been working on. And here I have, so I've got some granulating colors. I've got an opaque color. I've actually used titanium buff in this corner here and let it flow down into this color here. And I've also used Venetian red, which is also a fairly opaque color, and let them flow. So here we've got some opacity, and then it flows down into some of these beautiful browns. And I've used a sepia, but I've also used a hematite, which is a very granulating color, and I kind of want to show it to you. Let's see here. I'm kind of running out of room, which means I should be wrapping up this lesson, right? Okay, hematite burnt scarlet, and there's a bunch of different hematite colors in Daniel Smith's list of colors here. And I'm just going to try and dab some on right here. And hopefully it will do its thing and show us its beauty, not hiding its light under a bushel. Okay, the hematite burnt scarlet I've really been liking because it's like having 3 or 4 colors in one. It goes on kind of a nice brownish red, but you can already see as it starts to dry, and I'll pull it closer so you can really, well, not even dry, I mean, it's just starting to settle. You can start to see how textural it is. And there's like a really deep chocolatey brown that kind of sinks into the little hollows and crevices. And there's also kind of a staining color, the kind of reddish, peachy red tone that kind of sinks into the pigment, into the paper and stains a little bit. And then there's kind of a mid-ish brown that kind of does, I don't know, it just is a normal paint kind of thing. So I'm really loving this particular hematite burnt scarlet for adding some amazing texture to any time I need an interesting brown, because brown kind of seems like an uninteresting color. And so when you use one that granulates like this and has that sediment that's kind of that rich, deep, chocolatey brown, it's just gorgeous. I'm loving it right now. And there's kind of this little bit of staining effect, and you can see how it bleeds over here in this kind of peachy yellowish kind of way. And again, just very interesting color that I'm really enjoying these days. So yeah, like learning about these different pigment qualities, it helps you use them in different ways. And when I bought the hematite, I didn't know it was going to do that. I didn't know what it was going to be like. So, and as I've used it, I didn't learn this with my first painting, trying it out the first time. But as I started to try using it in different ways, and again, letting it flow across a page with a couple other colors is a great way to learn what its qualities are. And starting to see, oh, it's got this interesting undertone of one color and then the sediment of another. It's just a fascinating hue. It got me really excited about and thinking about ways I could use it in my paintings. So loving seeing how pigments react on, in different ways using those color washes, and starting to get to know them and then using them to contrast with each other. And right now, as we're sitting here talking, I'm seeing the hematite flowing down into my cinereous blue, and it's creating an interesting effect right in here. Interesting contrast, because the cinereous is such a quiet little pale, clear blue, and then we've got this complicated and interesting mixture of hematite flowing in here, this unpredictable bad boy, and the good little blue. So there's just an interesting kind of color play happening in there, just contrasts that are just so fascinating. So there I've basically just told you what I'm looking for in my pigments when I'm painting. One thing I want to mention is, again, most of the time I'm using my pigment that's squeezed into my palette, because I don't want to use up all my pigment on just a few paintings. And I find that when I'm using it straight from the tube like I did today, I use more pigment. I get a brighter, bolder color, and I get these amazing little pigment beads. Let me find that paper and show it to you one more time. Oh, I moved it over here. So, over here where I've got these dots of pure pigment, I've got this brilliant saturation, and then often there's like these little rat tails of color flowing down out of them. So it's a fascinating way to use color and have that pure pigment, that boldness of pure pigment, and boldness over here as well. Just that vivid pure pigment that's happening. And yet, most of the time, you use that in small doses where you have those dots, those pops of pure color. And then the rest of the time you're going to be wanting to use kind of a more controllable mixture, which is when I would go into my palette and use what I've squeezed into the palette. Okay, gonna kind of start looking at some of your questions here, because my throat's getting dry, so we got to start slowing down. And yeah. Okay, the Sennelier blue. Okay, I'm gonna grab a Sharpie because that Sennelier blue spelled like so. There we go. Sennelier blue. And is that the one color that I was talking about? This one from Sennelier. And there's a bunch of other languages on there too, which might actually, some of them will seem more easy to use, to say. Okay, questions. I'm going to move right over to the questions. And I'm going to scroll way back to the kind of the beginning here. Yeah, Marlene says she's having trouble getting her hands on an Escoda rigger too. It's funny that it's so hard to get right now. I'd love to take the credit for that because it is a beautiful brush. It's not the only brush that you should try. There's many great brushes out there, and really I feel like the brush is kind of secondary. I've used so many different kinds of brushes, and I always have a new favorite brush. And trying different brushes, I think, sometimes helps you use your brush strokes in different ways, like learn different ways of using your brush. So, you know, don't be afraid to try different brushes. This little loose goose that I was talking about, it's a #1 for the size, by the way. I had that brush for years before I started using it. And now that I'm using it, I don't use it all the time, but it makes the best little fine hairy lines. So I hang on to it for that benefit. Okay. I had a few people saying earlier that my voice over was you were hearing me twice. I hope that got straightened out. Yeah, I love seeing Anna say this looks like hematite burnt scarlet genuine. You caught it because that was the color. Okay. I have a question. What angle have I got my paper tilted at? I couldn't tell you the exact angle. What I have done actually for this most of the time is I prop my painting up on my water containers. And they're sour cream containers. They're about a 2-cup size. And I often just prop my board right up on my water containers. It's a nice little angle. And then sometimes I need it to go a little flatter. I might prop it up on a roll of masking tape, 1-inch tape, so it's only tilted 1 inch at that end. Let's see here. Bev comments that my course sounds lovely, but she can't afford to buy all the extra products. Please don't feel like you need to buy the extra products that are mentioned in the in the new course. Really, what I wanted to do was just use a variety of products because I know that as hobbyists, people tend to stockpile a lot of different things and then not know how to use them. So I wanted to try a bunch of different products to let you know what's out there and what you might have in your stash. But really, I mean, most of the projects you can do with just traditional watercolor paints. You know, I always stress that you should use what you have rather than just trying to buy stuff just because I recommend it. You know, enjoy your products, and then add what you can when you can, if you really feel like it's going to be beneficial. I'm just going to switch my camera around again. I always feel odd to be a disembodied voice, just talking. I should mention too that one thing that I'm doing as part of this course launch is, and again, it doesn't want to change sources for me. There we go. For this course launch is I've paired up with some of my creative friends. I've got some watercolorists and some crafters who are doing a blog hop with me. And so you not only have that chance to win course enrollment from my site, but you can also go on their blog posts from today and enter a comment to win on their posts as well. So make sure you do that because I would want lots of people to visit their site, but also for you to get that chance to win free enrollment. Okay, looking back through here, oh, I see a hello from Christine Graham from the Okanagan, who used to live in Dawson Creek and took my local course. And then I have people from all over the world, which I love seeing you guys here. Portugal, the United Kingdom, Australia. Okay, another question Velma Hutchinson asks, is the Sodalite Blue from Holbein or Daniel? The one I use is Daniel Smith. I have some Lunar Blue, Lynn. She says, if you like Sodalite, try Lunar Blue. I should try it again because I haven't learned to love it. I have it in my palette and I don't, and usually if I don't love a color, it's because I just haven't used it enough to really know what it will do. Because once I know what a color will do, then I am excited. I have all kinds of ideas for how I can use it and what it might go well with. But again, if you try too many new colors at once, you're not going to have that knowledge, and so then you're just kind of paralyzed with not knowing how to use it. Velma also asks, how do you choose the paints that you like? I don't know. I tend to just, I started out with about 12 very basic colors, and then over the years I started slowly adding new colors. We have been here for almost an hour. Holy cow. This is so much for being a quick live class. So I've just kind of slowly added different colors, and then I'll hear about a brand and want to try it. So I'll order a couple colors that maybe I might not have, because I don't like to just order colors that I already have tried and used, even if it's a different brand. And just kind of, I'm an intuitive artist. I do what I feel like doing. So, and I've given myself permission to not be academic about how I approach buying products, using products. I just want to really throw myself into whatever I'm trying and really enjoy it is my first goal, because I know that the learning will happen if you love what you're doing. How can you tell opaque from translucent shades on the tube before you buy? Probably, I'm trying to think. I don't think that they usually will tell you on the tube. You could, you're going to want to kind of do your research. You can usually find out online. So that's what I would suggest, is just looking online to see how the manufacturer describes it. Let's see here. The other thing is, a lot of Daniel Smith pigments are actually mixtures of multiple pigments. I have here Daniel Smith's Rose of Ultramarine, which is a quinacridone red and an ultramarine blue. So they're combined in the tube. So you can create that mixture by mixing those two colors on your own. You don't have to buy the tube. It's very convenient to have it, however. And my Rose of Ultramarine seems to have something's wrong with it. It still creates beautiful colors, but it smells really bad when I squeeze it out of the tube. And I made an amazing painting with it a couple months ago, but I had to kind of take a lot of deep breaths as I was working with it, because I was working with fresh pigment, and boy did it reek. So, but still beautiful, still using it. Okay, other questions. Where did it go? Sorry, my chat is acting up. If you just heard a loud sound in the background, that's snow sliding off our roof. Winter has moved into Dawson Creek. It's horrible. And I love winter. I shouldn't say horrible, but I'm just not ready yet. I'm still in denial. It's only October. It's a very early winter for us. The only way to know what a pigment will do is by trying it. Well, yes and no. Generally I've found that core colors, colors made by core or golden, these guys, generally they're high flow and they're very, very finely ground. So you don't get the granulating pigments, but you get pigments that have a lot of motion. And then with Daniel Smith, generally you're going to have sedimentary colors that are granulate really well, and yet not all their colors are really going to be like that. I don't know how to say this. I would say just enjoy it. Just look. What I would say is, don't go out and buy a bunch of colors right now. Just look at the colors you have and paying attention to what they do. Look for some of the characteristics that I've talked about, and then try to use them in interesting ways. That's really what I want you to take away from this, is not, oh, I'm going to go out and buy this particular pigment, but, oh, that's why that pigment does that, and now I know how to use it or when to avoid it. And when you know that, it makes it a lot easier to use your paint. Okay, I'm going to try to wrap this up because we really are out of time. I've got appointments I need to be going to, and I've really had a great time today. Again, I'm excited about my new Creative Watercolor Techniques course. I'm excited that I get to give away a watercolor kit and free enrollment. So make sure you check out the links at the bottom of this video. Again, there's just 3 links there, I think, to really help you not get confused as to what does what. So go check out the post. Feel free to ask questions. There's always a place for comments. And make sure you watch the video as well on painting a watercolor background, because it's kind of a wet and wet approach, but it's also using design, not just a swash of swooshy color across the page. So, that's not the only thing I do. And next week I want to talk about, I had a great idea in my head. I want to talk about value studies. And again, this is the basics of building a great painting. So we're going to try to go there next week. And there's so much I want to share. So, and I'm seeing you guys are so great in the comments. You're giving each other advice, helping each other find supplies, which I think is awesome. And and I have people telling me I should be very thankful for living in a cold climate. So, Magdalena, we should trade maybe half the year or something. Anyhow, I just want to thank you again for showing up to be a part of this. And you guys are always awesome, and I've been loving these live classes just because it's such a fun way to interact with you. Wish I could hang out longer, but I really have to wrap this up. Thank you again. I hope you'll all have just a great day, and just enjoy your paints. Just pay attention to what they do, and you'll just think of even more better ways to use them. So yeah, talk to you later on.